Welcome to today's Explainer. I'm your host, and today we're mapping the invisible physics of human language. Okay, let's just dive right into this. We're looking at systemic functional linguistics, specifically Halliday and Matheson's absolutely seminal work on the architecture of the clause complex. Now, we aren't just looking at words on a page today. Oh, no. We are going to deconstruct the actual gravitational forces that bind our thoughts together in real time. We're going to see exactly how simple, everyday language acts as a highly advanced computational system.
Here's our architectural blueprint for the explainer. First, architecture. Second, taxis. Third, expansion. Fourth, projection. And finally, nesting. Let's get started.
Section 1. Architecture of the clause complex. You see, texts aren't just random buckets of isolated clauses. Honestly, it's better to think of a text like a bustling city grid, where clauses are dynamically chained together. Let's look at a real-world excerpt from a Chinese gardens walking tour. Make your way back towards the pump house. Okay, that's one clause. And walk under Pierce Street to the southern end of Darling Harbor. These aren't just two separate instructions floating around in a vacuum. They are physically linked in a continuous flow to actively guide your actions.
And that brings us to a formal definition. The clause complex is essentially the grammatical equivalent of the written sentence. Think of individual clauses like atoms. On their own, sure, they have properties. But when they combine through what we call logico-semantic relations, they form a unified molecule of meaning. So a clause complex is quite literally a linguistic molecule. Which naturally leads us to the most fascinating question of our linguistic physics class. How exactly do these linguistic atoms bond to form complex meaning molecules? What are the invisible forces that are actually holding our sentences together?
Section 2. Taxis. Degrees of interdependency.
Welcome to the very first dimension of our systemic matrix, and that is taxis. Taxis dictates the gravitational pull and structural hierarchy between clauses. Coming from the Greek word for arrangement or order, it's the degree of interdependency between clauses in a nexus. Simply put, when two clauses bond together, you have to ask, do they hold equal status or unequal status? Is one completely dominating the other?
This essentially gives us the two primary types of clause bonding. First up, we have parataxis. This is equal status. It's the linguistic equivalent of a covalent bond in chemistry, where atoms share electrons equally. We actually denote this with numbers, 1, 2, 3. The clauses initiate and continue on equal footing. Then we have hypotaxis. Now, this is an unequal status, kind of like an ionic bond. One clause is dominant, we call that the alpha, and the other is totally dependent, the beta. That beta clause relies entirely on the structural gravity of the alpha clause just to survive.
Moving on to Section 3, expansion. Elaborating, extending, enhancing.
Now we transition into the second dimension of our matrix, logico-semantic relations. Starting off with expansion. This is how we link phenomena of the exact same order of experience. Expansion comes in three distinct flavors, and Halliday created a brilliantly simple symbolic notation for them. First is elaborating, marked by the equal sign. This happens when one clause restates or specifies the other in greater detail. Second is extending, marked by a plus sign. This adds a completely new element or maybe an alternative. And third is enhancing, marked by a multiplication sign. This multiplies the meaning by qualifying the clause with time, place, cause, or even a condition. So remember, equals, plus, and multiply.
So what happens when we cross our gravitational taxis with our flavors of expansion? Well, let's look at elaboration. Paratactic elaboration gives us apposition. Two clauses, totally equal status. John didn't wait, he ran away. 1 equals 2. Simple. But hypotactic elaboration creates a non-defining relative clause. Think about this. John ran away, which surprised everyone. That which surprised everyone part, that's an unequal descriptive dependency. Alpha equals beta. The grammar subtly shifts the rhetorical weight right under our noses.
Let's pull up that Sydney guidebook again to see this in action. Follow the pathways around the landscaped gardens before resting at the tea house. All right, this is hypotactic enhancement, the multiplication sign. The temporal clause before resting is our beta. It acts as this invisible structural scaffolding, qualifying the time of the dominant alpha clause. It's completely dependent, yet absolutely essential for the procedural flow to make any sense.
Section 4, projection, locutions, and ideas. Let's leave the physical world of expansion for a second and move to a higher order of semiotic experience altogether. We're entering the realm of projection, which splits down into two primary avenues. First, we have the locution, marked by double quotation marks. This projects a construction of wording through a verbal process, literally what someone actually said. Second, we have the idea, marked by single quotation marks. This projects a construction of meaning through a mental process, what someone thought or felt internally.
And you guessed it, just like expansion, projection intersects perfectly with taxis. When we use parataxis with a locution, we get quoting. "I am dreaming," she said. Two freestanding equals, one quote, two. But when we use hypotaxis with an idea, we get reporting. She wondered if she was dreaming. Here, the gist of the thought is bound tightly into an unequal dependency. Alpha projects beta. It's an incredibly elegant way for the language to distinguish between someone's exact words and the general meaning of a thought.
And now we reach it, the unified field theory of systemic functional linguistics, Halliday's two-dimensional intersection matrix. On one axis, we have our gravitational poles, parataxis and hypotaxis. On the other are semantic relations, elaborating, extending, enhancing, locution, and idea. Guys, every single complex sentence you have ever spoken, written, or read is an activated node on this exact grid. It's mind-blowing.
But here's the ultimate question. Looking at a static grid on a screen is one thing. But when you are speaking at, 150 words per minute, how do you choreograph multiple, simultaneous, layered relations in real time without your brain just completely crashing?
Which brings us to Section 5, nesting, choreographing the flow. Welcome to our grand finale, nesting. This is the recursive architectural feature that allows human beings to build infinitely intricate clause complexes right on the fly. Let's deconstruct a beautiful example from a folktale. In pain, Kukul pulled out the arrow and headed for the river to wash his wound. Now notice the brilliant architecture here. The sequence, pulled out the arrow and headed for the river, is a standard paratactic sequence, right? 1 and 2. But look closer. Clause 2 actually encloses a hypotactic purpose clause, headed for the river to wash his wound. Beta, multiplying alpha. The parataxis literally swallows the hypotaxis seamlessly inside it.
So how do we unspool this when we're actually analyzing a text? It's just 3 steps. First, identify the primary tactics nexus. Find your main backbone. Are we looking at equal partners or dominant dependencies? Second, locate internal bracketing. Look for those subcomplexes hiding inside the primary nodes. And third, map the dynamic recursion. Honestly, by doing this, you get to witness the sheer, raw computational power of everyday grammar unfolding right before your eyes.
As Halliday so profoundly observed, the beauty of the clause complex lies in, quote, the dynamic potential of the system, the ability to choreograph very long and intricate patterns of semantic movement while maintaining a continuous flow. Spoken language is not just a static artifact sitting on a page. It is a masterful, real-time, highly dynamic dance. Which leaves us with just one final thought. The next time you find yourself telling a story, giving someone instructions, or passionately arguing a point, realize that your brain is actively navigating this multi-dimensional matrix. You are perfectly balancing gravitational dependencies, expansions, and nested projections in literal milliseconds. The system is already inside you. So are you ready to map the hidden physics of your own linguistic architecture?